Hey, this is Mirabek, the founder of Overnight Success Publishing and host of Overnight Success TV, and welcome to another awesome episode of our show. Today I have a pleasure to be here with Brian Marinelli, the founder of Dynamic Transactive Healing. And I know it's a mouthful, and Brian is going to definitely tell us a little bit more about what it actually means. So, Brian, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure having you here.
It's great to be here.
And I want to just dive right in because, I want to know what dynamic transactive healing is and really what your expertise is as the trauma expert helping people to heal from all aspects of her life. But maybe before you even dive into that,
Yes.
Why don't you tell us your story and how did you even get to this point to become the expert on trauma?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. What happened was I've been a writer and speaker for many years. I wrote this book called Discover Your Inner Strength with Brian Tracy, Stephen Covey, and Ken Blanchard back in 2009.
Yeah.
And I've been in the speaking industry for a number of years, mostly on communication skills and how to become more charismatic. And I was happy doing that. But in 2014, things began to change for me. And what happened in 2014, I started having mobility issues that no doctor seemed to be able to figure out. And just as they're trying to discover that, doing tests, and then in 2015, the first day of 2015 actually, the first day, I ended up in the hospital on January 1st, comparing a severe abdominal pain. And after a week of being there, they found that I had 3 ulcers.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was getting over that when I had to be rushed for emergency surgery about a couple months later because my gallbladder was about to rupture.
Oh.
And there was a blockage, and no one caught this apparently. And it was moved to take time. Actually, my doctor told me a couple more hours, I'd be dead.
Wow.
I just wouldn't have made it through the other side. So they didn't tell me at the time, of course,
Yeah, sure.
But then fast forward a year, and I was still having mobility issues, and then I started to have falls. I mean, not basically I wouldn't lose consciousness or, pass out. I would just fall, and they didn't know why. After doing tests, they thought maybe at first I had MS. It turns out I did not have MS. I have a rare form of incurable and untreatable muscular dystrophy.
So uncurable and untreatable.
Incurable and untreatable, yeah, and a rare form of that. And that just really knocked me out. I mean, what was I supposed to do? And I tried to find my own inner strength, to try to get through it. And I became very disillusioned because there wasn't a lot out there on this. I read books, I went to seminars, I listened to audio programs, I mean, anything I could, and I got very disillusioned because there wasn't a lot out there. It seemed like most of the material was rehashed, lukewarm rhetoric, like, hey, stay positive.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's another day.
Sure.
Just stay strong. And listen, that's all very flowery, but prose, but it doesn't really hold a lot of water when you're going through a trauma, especially physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. So I had to create my own path, and that's how dynamic transactive healing came about. Because I realized that when you go through a trauma, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, it affects all parts of your body. If you have physical trauma, it'll affect you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Your emotional trauma will affect you physically. I mean, a good example is heart attacks. Look at heart attacks. Yeah. Now, doctors tell us the number one cause of heart attacks is stress. An emotional response causes a physical response. Yeah. So I created dynamic transactive healing so that you could heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually simultaneously.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what we do with that.
So the first thing I got out of this, though, is first the point that you actually were motivated enough or inspired enough not to just buy into the diagnosis, but you actually wanted to do something. You said uncurable disease, right? So most people, when they hear those words, they're like, okay, I'm done. But that wasn't you, right? So what drove you? How did you get to the point where you just didn't take the doctor's diagnosis to heart and you decided to do something on your own?
There's a difference between curing and healing. I tell people about healing. There's a difference. Healing is much greater than curing. I mean, if you have a cure, what you do is you have to find a way to live vibrantly with your disease. And you can do that. You can live vibrantly with your disease or your trauma. But a lot of people don't realize that. You have to, there are ways to live vibrantly. So the first thing is, don't define yourself by your disease, or don't define yourself by your disaster. That's the one thing I can tell people. That's what happens to people. People define themselves by their trauma, you are much greater than that.
Yeah.
And don't focus on curing, focus on healing, because that's much greater. That's where, healing. So I may not be cured, I may never be cured, but I can still live vibrantly, and healing is what you should be striving for. Healing, not necessarily curing.
Got it.
Because you may be able to get over your trauma. You may be able to get over your trauma, but you can move past your trauma. That's it. So move past your trauma. People say to get over it, just forget about it. That's not easy to do.
Yeah.
When you're going through a difficult time, trauma, you say it to somebody who's going through trauma, that's like, how could I possibly, I mean, when you get a diagnosis like I did with a chronic illness that's never going to go away, it's a progressive and degenerative, or someone loses a loved one unexpectedly, they just die, or a spouse of 30 years leaves you, or a business you created, your business partner sits down with all the money.
Yeah.
I know that actually happened to a friend of mine. He had built this business for 20, 30 years, and then he dies, and his wife barely had the money and the company, and his business partner of 30 years took all the money, skipped town, and left her penniless.
Yeah.
Traumas like that happen a lot. Yeah. And so you have to, like I said, that you may not get over it, but you move past it. There are ways to live vibrantly despite your trauma.
So you can move on and just take the next step instead of living in the past and living with it, buying into it, which is really kind of self-destructive at that point. But you could have probably bought into the diagnosis and just decided, that's it, right?
Absolutely.
And just be depressed and stressed and maybe gone by now. So,
yes,
but instead you decide to move, take the next step. So for anyone that's dealing with trauma, and the way you define trauma sounds like everybody has some sort of version or level of trauma in their life, I would say. So really kind of not dwelling on it and not living in the past, but maybe compartmentalize it a little bit. And okay, well, it happened. Things happen in life, right? But the ability to take the next step and move past it, I think is a really important lesson here, because you're obviously a living proof of that.
Right.
So is there any advice for people that are going through trauma, like now, it just happened? What would be kind of the first thing that you would advise someone to actually do in that situation? I
think a lot of people look for reasons when they go through trauma. They look for a reason as to why this happened. And there's a lot of different ideas out there, the philosophy. Some people feel that, we think all these erroneous ideas like God's punishing you or something like that, or the universe is trying to teach you a lesson, or that, and all the time we blame ourselves. We think that we did something to cause that. All the time people are looking for reasons, but sometimes the reason why bad things happen to good people is no reason. It just does. And that may sound very fatalistic and glib to some people, but I think if you really think about it, it's very liberating, especially going through trauma, because when you recognize and start looking for reasons, because when we're looking for reasons, we ask, it's really, you can't see all these rhetorical questions. And those questions become more questions. Those questions become more questions. Really, it's the why me question, just restated 100 different ways. And there isn't an answer. So don't look for reasons. But there is, however, a caveat. You can find meaning. Not reasons, meaning. There's a difference between the two.
So explain the difference, because like I always like to say, everything happens for a reason. I feel that I'm meaning the same thing that you mean by meaning, but let's just explain to everybody what you really mean by it, because when we spoke before the show, I found it really interesting, like the way you define it, and I'm sure it can help a lot of people.
Well, reasons are where we're trying to find a linear approach to why this happened to me. Okay, and that there isn't always a reason. I had a friend who was a picture of health. She is a yoga instructor. She always worked out. She was very healthy, and then one day she falls out of bed, and they find out there's a tumor wrapped around her spine. What's the reason for that? I have another friend who built a business for, like I was saying a minute ago, 30 years, lost everything. The person sold the business underneath them and skipped town with all the money. What's the reason for that? They didn't do anything that caused that. And looking for reasons, there isn't a reason. God's not punishing you. You're not being told that's about the universe. You're not being, we blame ourselves a lot of times, and it's not your fault. So what meaning means is stop looking for the reasons. Try to find meaning in your life. Find your purpose and your passion. And that's why I say you can still live vibrantly with your disease or with your trauma. You can live. Mm-hmm. So don't look for reasons, because reasons are not going to, you're not going to ever find a real reason. Sure. I mean, okay, we know why I had the mobility issues for me. We know why I had the ulcers. I have muscular dystrophy. But that didn't change anything. You know, so I had to look for, you know, I sat around for a few months going, why me, why me, why me? And here's something I learned. Why me? Why anyone?
Yeah.
Why anyone? So the thing is, search for meaning and purpose in your life, not reasons, because the reasons aren't going to make much of a difference. Even if you're able to find a reason, it's still not going to help you heal. You're just going to continue to be stuck in that place and get, you know, the first 5 stages of loss. You have to get the acceptance. But the problem is, if you never really, you know, acceptance is something that you have to come to. But it's not just acceptance. It's acceptance that it has happened to you and there's nothing you can do to change it. Mm-hmm. But you can live vibrantly. You can live beyond that. You can't live in the past. Yeah. You can't live in the future, but you can live in the present. And people say, well, logically they know that, but are they aware of it?
Yeah, so being aware of it. Yeah, for whatever it's worth, you know, whatever the reason or meaning behind things are, like, I'm sure you're gonna affect millions of people in your lifetime by sharing this and actually helping them through trauma, through your course and your books and other places. So I'm sure that a lot of people will be appreciative of your help and, you know, going through what you've been through. I mean, you have a first-hand experience in this. So, you know, whatever the reason is, you know, at this point, hopefully that's gonna, you know, turn out to be something that was, you know, awesome thing that will help a lot of other people. So
can I share one insight with people, that one thing they can do right now today to get better? You know, we all have people in the past. When you go through trauma, you know, you can't live in the past and you can't live in the future. Yeah. People like to live in the past. They like to think back to where they were before somebody got sick and remember happy memories. Or they think about another future or a brighter tomorrow. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with having those past memories, and nothing wrong with having ambitions for the future. But the really thing I can tell people, the one thing you can do right now, today, is become and live in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And like I said, you may logically say, I know that, but are you aware of it? And there's a difference. You know, the soul serenity prayer says, God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and give me the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah. Well, you know, when you live in the present, it takes a lot of courage to live in the present because it's open-ended. But you can't live in the past, you can't modify the past, you can't foresee the future. So what you need to do is live in the present moment. Because if you don't live in the present moment, what's going to happen is that present will very quickly become your future. Yeah. And that future will more quickly become your past, and you'll still not move forward. So try to live in the present moment. Be aware of it. Take an objective approach to life, and look at it from the whole picture, and you will be going to be able to see possibilities to heal that maybe you didn't realize before. Yeah.
And we had Laurel Geis on the show, and she actually shared with people some great exercises, how to get into the present moment and stuff. So if you haven't seen Laurel's episode, definitely go check it out. It's somewhere on this page in the past section.
I mean, she's the expert on mindfulness.
Yeah, she's awesome. So Brian, if somebody wants to connect with you or find out more about your program and some of the things that you actually do to help them through their trauma, where can they go?
They want to go to my website at traumatransformer.com. That's www.traumatransformer.com. You go there, you can find out about something we're doing. We have this new thing called the Hope Collection, where we're interviewing people who are trauma experts. We have some other resources coming out, a program called Trauma Transformer Matrix. So I mean, we got a lot of things that we're working on. Go to there and you can find out more about the products we offer and how we can help you move past your trauma and live vibrantly.
That's really cool. I love the name too, Trauma Transformer. I can't believe that it wasn't taken yet. So that's a really good domain name. So I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, sure.
If you had to recommend a couple of books that you've read that affected your life or inspired you, that maybe you would read more than once, what would it be?
There's a couple of books I can really recommend to you. One book I think is very important. It's one of the few books I found that really, delved deep and really hit trauma home, is When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Harold Kushner. That book is, I mean, even if you're not going through trauma, you should read it. I mean,
cool.
it's amazing because he worked with people with trauma, and he had to go through his own trauma. His son died from a very debilitating disease, and so he really hits it head on. I actually was so impressed with the book. I actually went out and bought a 25th anniversary edition. I went to an antiquarian booksellers to find a hardback 20th anniversary copy because that's how that book, I mean, out of all the books I read, impactful. It's a phenomenal book. It's an international bestseller, so it's not just me saying that. Another book that I love, and I read it even before I got sick, but I read it again after I got sick, and I read it every year. I read it every year for years. For the last 15 years, I read it every year, and when I got sick, I read it again. And it's a book that is really an unsung hero in self-improvement. It's called The Magic of Believing by Claude and Bristol. The Magic of Believing by Claude and Bristol. And it's still available. It's still out there in the bookstores. It is a phenomenal book. It's about believing and believing beyond, and this man who wrote it actually used to be a religious reporter, and he talks about how, why do people get healed? Because they believe. But you can use this to, even if you're not going through trauma, it's great for helping you believe that you can accomplish beyond your limitations. And it's just a phenomenal book.
So as far as people go, so what would be, I mean, you've written, I see just on your book, Brian Tracy and Stephen Covey, and so it sounds like you've been around very successful people. If you had to mention one or two people that have really big effect on your life and it inspired you to do things in your life, what kind of mentors are you recommending? Or
well, that's tough. There's so many people that have really helped me. I think that Tony Robbins was very instrumental to me. Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich. Claude and Bristol. But I think that, I find mentors every day. I mean, I think we all do. Just because there's someone, yes, I've been around people that are successful, well-known authors and stuff like that. But you know what? Everyone can be a mentor to you. And everyone's a teacher, everyone's a student.
Yeah.
I think that during my recovery, or when I started to heal, I met people in areas I didn't never even just meet them. And I meet people that I never even knew before, strangers who I became friends or my friends or acquaintances that I knew came to my aid, and I gained insight from them. That I learned things that I never knew that they even knew. So I learned from a multitude of people. I think we all do, and I think that when you're looking for a mentor, you just look, in your own neighborhood. Yeah. There are people out there that will be able to help you. I mean, I've had great doctors, I've had great teachers, I've had great spiritual teachers, I've had a number of people, but I can't pick like just one.
Sure, I think the key takeaway from this is you really can learn something from everybody you meet in your life.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how successful or poor or rich or whatever. I think everybody has something that you can learn from them. So just be open-minded, and when you have a conversation with people, just treat them as an equal and listen to what they have to say. And I'm sure that you can learn something from everybody.
Treat everyone the same, regardless of they're digging ditches or they're a part of the company, because what they're doing is important to them. Yeah. And I'll tell you something, when it comes to this, you're going to learn a lot from your trauma. Their trauma will teach you a lot too. Yeah. And that's what the thing is. And that's one of the mentors of all. I mean, you say, well, Brian, how can I learn my trauma? Like I said, I'm not saying that you should be happy that you have trauma or become comfortable with it. You should fight it every day. But you can then, like I said, once again, what I said about meaning. You can gain some meaning from this, and find your purpose, find your passion. And if you don't know your purpose is how I define success. Yeah.
So what is, speaking of purpose and passion, the next question I have for you is, what is your why? What is your passion in life? What gets you out of bed every morning?
Helping people through trauma.
That's your life mission at this point, right?
Now it is, yeah. Because I think that I think I have an obligation to help people to go through this, because I've gone through it. I'm not suggesting I know what your trauma is like, but I do know there's one common denominator in trauma that permeates everything. That's a sense of despair. I want to show people how to live vibrantly with their trauma. Yeah. How to live with passion and purpose. That's actually my definition of success. I mean purpose. People say, well, I'm not sure what my purpose is now. Well, what are you passionate about? Yeah. If you don't know what your purpose is, look at your passion. Your passion is your purpose is your passion. And my passion is helping people overcome trauma and share my insights that I've discovered to help them move forward in their lives and heal from their trauma, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a real pleasure to have you. You are inspiration, and I really appreciate how much help you actually throw out there in the world and how much you help people. So thank you for taking the time to be here. And I hope that you listen to this. If you have or had any trauma in your life, or you know somebody that is going through it, I think this would be an awesome resource. So go to Brian's page, get involved, get some more information on it, and just remember, don't let trauma define you, like Brian said. I had my own back issues in the past. There were several months where I just had no idea what I'm going to do, and I got through it as well. And it's very uplifting when you finally take the next step and you find the next passion or the next step. So don't let drama define you. That's really, I think, the takeaway from this show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some key learning lessons in this. And just go ahead and implement something. Go grab one of the books that Brian mentioned. Go talk to some people around you. Find a mentor. Just take action. I always say the difference between success and failure is implementation. So implement one little nugget from the show, and that's going to be another step toward your success. So I hope to see you at the next on the next show. And till then, wake up and be successful.